Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate in the wake of that ban on citizens from 7 Muslim-majority nations to the United States. A temporary ban, insists the White House. Well, you have a very divided United States, and we're talking about it on the show with Jean-Pierre Larochelle, director of the Political Forum. Welcome back as well to Michael Kirtley, founder of the Bridge to Hope campaign.
Greetings.
Just telling us he was back from Kentucky. Attorney Joe Smallhoover and Sarah El-Yafi, political commentator who joins us from Los Angeles. Welcome back. Just before the break, Michael Kirtley, talking about that divided America. Dutch television went to Harlan County, Kentucky, where 85% of the vote went to Donald Trump in November. Citizens there happy to see a president who keeps his promises.
I don't think it's nothing about racism, nothing about Muslims. I mean, to each their own, but he's trying to keep the country safe.
I see nothing wrong with it. He's just trying to keep the United States safe.
Is this still a country where everyone is welcome?
I believe so. I believe so, yeah. Well,
just not now?
Yeah, well, temporarily. I'm sure it'll be lifted eventually. It's just a temporary thing for safety.
Better safe than sorry?
Always.
Michael Kirtley?
Well, I think that the people of Kentucky have very wonderful hearts, and they believe what they're saying. I'm not sure that what's happening at the top or among the intellectuals around Donald Trump, and yes, that word can be used, I think, for his cohorts, corresponds to that same thing. And I also think that there's a latent racism in this so-called Muslim ban, because first of all, it targets Muslim countries, and Trump purposely said, except for Christians, over the long run. And what do they need to do to vet people who have already been vetted for more than a year? I think that what we're going to see in the near future is an extension of this ban continually and extreme vetting applied to Muslims from many countries. The problem with that in terms of Kentucky is that Kentuckians, I mean, I spend a lot of time among them, when they meet a Muslim, they're going to welcome them very warmly. I've taken many Muslims to Kentucky, but they know very few Muslims. Therefore, when they hear about terrorism, when they hear about the problems that exist in the Muslim world, and Donald Trump or others are telling them in fear-mongering terms what's going to happen, then they react to that in basic terminology, which says if you have to ban Muslims from coming, they don't think about what this means to the American dream or what this means to the American sense of tradition in terms of accepting people of all religions. And therein lies the rub. If you're going to be able to work with that central part of America that is a good thinking and a good-hearted people, you have to be able to talk to them.
Joe Smallhoover, you were telling us you hail from Western Pennsylvania, where one of those states that was supposed to vote for Hillary Clinton, that's what the polls suggested, and where people instead went for Donald Trump. Does what Michael's saying resonate with you?
In part, you have to. Pennsylvania, for instance, is Kentucky is much more rural than Pennsylvania is. Pennsylvania is on the eastern part of the state. Philadelphia, a massive urban center. On the western part of the state, Pittsburgh, which is also a very massive urban center. But James Carville once said that Pennsylvania was Philadelphia on one side, Pittsburgh on the other, and Alabama in the middle. In the middle part of the state and south of Pittsburgh, where I grew up, we're in that. It's the Appalachians, it's the countryside, and so that state is very much divided between the urban population.
And those Trump supporters are energized.
And the Trump supporters out in the hills.
They're energized because they feel like for once someone's talking their language, or speaking at least to them, and following through on their on his promise.
Well, that's certainly what the polls in Pennsylvania showed.
Yeah. Let me ask you, Sarah El-Yafi, you're in Southern California. You have very cosmopolitan, what's more cosmopolitan than Los Angeles? And then you have very conservative areas nearby. This wall of misunderstanding, is it growing? Is there a way to bridge it?
Yes. Before answering that question, I just wanna say something about this whole Muslim ban thing. You know, there are 196 countries in today's world, and the USA is militarily present in 130 of them. The USA has 900 bases around the planet. That's almost 70% of the world. So, and they're the ones who need to feel safe. You know what I mean? Like, it's just just if you drive a few facts by the American people, it will put a lot of things in perspective. And exactly as my two fellow guests were saying, most of these people are not mean-spirited people who are out there to hurt anybody. They are simply not aware of what's going on in the world. They have no idea about the United States policies towards the world. They don't know the foreign policy of the United States and how much harm it's done around the world. They don't know how many Donald Trumps puppets they've put around the world, whether it is in Latin America, whether it is in Asia, whether it is in Africa or the Middle East. If the United States population had any idea how its government has been behaving over the past few decades, I really think the electorate would be behaving completely differently on the right today. Having said that,
but isn't the message that you're putting out that, well, those people are ignorant?
I mean, of course, it is a type of ignorance, but ignorance is prevalent in all countries, but not all countries have the type of dominance that the United States have. So if you go to, say, you know, a Western world country like Belgium, for example, and you take the average citizen, I'm not saying that the Belgian person knows definitely a lot more than the American, but the Belgian doesn't have the responsibility of the American. This is unfortunately the power of the United States. In case America needs to be reminded, the global attention suggests many important takeaways why everyone in the entire world is so worried about Donald Trump, because they're so deeply embedded in the international world order. They're so responsible as a result. Every decision that the US president makes affects the lives of billions of citizens around the world. That's not the same for France or even England or the United Kingdom. The United States is a country which, despite its economic drop-downs and its supersized debt, is still the world's biggest superpower. It's a nation with super wealth and a super army, and as I said earlier, with 900 bases around the world. I really, unfortunately, don't think that the American can walk around just reading today's news. I think if a little bit of education came on what the government has been doing, I'm not talking 50 years ago and 40 years ago. I'm just talking in the past 10 years. I mean, the United States enjoys tremendous, unparalleled economic, military, and political power. Our American citizen cannot ignore that.
And yet, Jean-Pierre La Rochelle, there's this feeling among the electorate, and this is the polls suggested over and over again, that people have doubts over that future of the prevalence of the United States dominance that's existed since the Second World War. Donald Trump's slogan was hugely popular, "Make America Great Again," as if it wasn't great anymore. There is this feeling that America isn't what it used to be.
Yeah, no, I think it's quite accurate. I mean, we saw, the United States obviously was clearly the major superpower in the world, but we've seen a transition over the recent history, and we saw this in the Obama administration, where the United States would move more to multilateral action, not necessarily taking the lead all the time. I mean, we have the crisis taking place in Syria being negotiated between Russia and Turkey without the U.S. even at the table. So there's a lot of reasons to see the decline of the U.S. But I think that what we're seeing with Trump is a complete revolution and transformation in style. And I think the media is having trouble adapting to this. And so there's a lot of misinformation. And some of it was cited here. I think some very unfair criticism. There's a lot to criticize about Trump's actions. But for instance, the media had reported that the Homeland Security wasn't familiar with this order prior to its announcement. Well, just prior to this broadcast, the Department of Homeland Security gave a press conference where they said that they were fully aware.
They learned about it on Thursday.
They learned about it, he said prior to that. In fact, the secretary said that he knew about it for 2 years, and then they tried to get him down on specifics because obviously it was before that. But he tried to claim that there were drafts going back and forth and that he and the undersecretary...
All right, some misreporting.
Yeah.
But also it's the communication strategy of the president is tough to read.
That's what I'm saying. It's very unusual.
Let's take a look at one example. Last Friday, Donald Trump welcoming the British Prime Minister, Theresa May, press conference at the White House. After saying he supports waterboarding, he, in her company, added that, he would defer to his new defense secretary, James Mattis. Let's listen carefully to his wording.
General James Mattis, and he has stated publicly that he does not necessarily believe in torture or waterboarding, or however you want to define it. Enhanced interrogation, I guess, would be a word that a lot of people would like to use. I don't necessarily agree, but I would tell you that he will override because I'm giving him that power.
I don't necessarily agree, but he will override. How are we supposed to read that? And is that improvisation, or is that clever political instincts here?
I think this is what we need to figure out, because on the one hand, there does seem to be some indications that this may be some sort of clever political maneuvering.
Because he leaves it vague enough, right?
I think that there is an argument to be made that there is a sort of a maneuverability game being played here. It's really very hard to understand. I mean, just the fact that he even used the word torture outright. We have Giuliani saying that he was actually instructed to create a Muslim ban to the concern about whether this was actually some sort of discriminatory practice. We should note, though, that the countries involved, other than Syria, were actually defined under previous legislation under Obama. So it wasn't like,
but not in the same way.
No, but I'm saying those countries were defined by that legislation. It was a different type of restriction, I agree. But the point is, if you want to make the charge that this is based on racism, we said, well, this was a predefined list of countries.
The fact, may I go?
Go ahead.
The fact is that from the people that I've followed, people close to Donald Trump, very close to Donald Trump, over the past year, I would say that many of them are very intelligent, and I would call some of them my friends. Almost all of them have a serious Muslim problem in their brain. And almost all of them would be very happy if we were limited to only Muslims that came from very specific countries, such as Morocco, for example, or Tunisia, and maybe the Saudis under certain circumstance. Almost all of them see what's happening in the future as a kind of war of civilizations. And they frame it that way. They talk of it that way. And the people around Trump talk of it that way. So to somehow try to explain the Muslim ban in terms of what happened in the past takes away the context of the situation today that Donald Trump himself presented to the world before he was elected. So we have to be very careful. We can't just say this is the continuation of a policy that more or less took place under Obama or more or less took place under Bush. This is the creation of a policy that concerns a mindset that's very much installed. This is not conspiracy theory. This is very much installed within many people that Trump has selected around him, that the world is a divided world between the Christian West and the Muslim East.
We've seen criticism from many precincts, though, including over the past 24 to 48 hours from likes of the Ford Motor Company, Amazon. What impact is that going to have? Is this just?
Well, it's going to have some impact because
how far will those corporations really press this?
They are going to press it to some extent. They're interested, obviously, in terms of immigration, in terms of their own labor needs, because the Silicon Valley and the tech industry in general is heavily dependent upon foreign labor source. So I think they're interested in it from that perspective, in addition to whatever humanitarian concerns that we have. But I think it's really unfair to just blanketly call this a Muslim ban. It may be, and there may be an argument for it, but there is a legitimate argument to be made on the other side that this is targeted against a perceived threat and a real
Donald
threat.
Trump called it a Muslim ban.
He did. I was the one that pointed it out, that he called it a Muslim ban with his conversation with Giuliani. However,
no, but even before, when he was campaigning.
Yes, even before. But the administration has been very clear that this is not a Muslim ban. They explained why it's not a Muslim ban. Giuliani explained why it's not a Muslim ban. And there is an argument to be made that this is a ban, a travel ban put into place to try to control a possible terrorist threat.
All right. Sarah El-Yafi earlier telling us how this impacts the whole planet when the United States has this kind of conversation. The president of the European Council listing Washington's policies among potential threats for Europe, on par with Russian and Chinese encroachment and jihadist violence. Here's what Donald Tusk said in a statement that was sent out to 27 of the 28 EU nations. He didn't send it out to Britain. ahead of a summit that's taking place Friday in Malta. The change in Washington puts the European Union in a difficult situation, with the new administration seeming to put into question the last 70 years of American foreign policy. Now, it raises another question, which is this going to, we've seen this gelling of public opinion, rallies in London, in many European cities, Angela Merkel saying she would welcome refugees. Is this going to rally pro-EU forces, or is it going to be more votes for the likes of Marine Le Pen? At the end of the day, will the two sides cancel each other out, Mike?
Well, I think that what's happening in America right now is definitely going to appeal to the more far-right elements of society in Europe, and for at least in the short run, will appeal to them enough to attract more members. I mean, I think this comforts anybody who is Front National or part of any other rightist group in Great Britain or other places in Europe. I say that because he exudes success. I mean, he's confused the media. I mean, whatever we can say about the demonstrations raise the idea that he's being followed. I mean, Donald Trump loves a crowd. He has created an aura about himself in the first 10 days that other people can only relate to positively, I think.
Except that the crowds are actually against him.
I don't think that he cares about. I really don't think he cares that they're negative.
No such thing as bad publicity in his book.
I don't sense that at all. I think what he wants right now is the maximum publicity, because if he's getting publicity based on a particular policy, that policy is debatable. If he's getting publicity based on what he does inside the White House, that's a little more Byzantine. And the press is, as long as there are demonstrations in the street, they're not going to focus as much as what's going on in the White House, which I think is much more sinister in a way.
Sarah El-Yafi, the argument being that at these demonstrations, it's like-minded people preaching to their own chapel. And in the meantime, Donald Trump is owning the news cycle.
So, you know what? We started this conversation by talking about Steve Bannon, and I didn't have the opportunity to say the phrase conspiracy theory went around, and it is not a conspiracy theory. It would be a conspiracy theory if Steve Bannon didn't exist, and I was telling you that there's a guy called Steve Bannon who's doing that. That's a conspiracy theory. We have all the data and all the sound bites coming out of Bannon. And as you said, Donald Trump is dominating the news cycle. But Steve Bannon has called the news and the media the opposition party. And I think if we make, I always say this, I think if we make a difference between the character of Donald Trump versus the administration of Donald Trump. The character of Donald Trump is in a world of its own. Donald Trump was a Democrat up until a few years ago. He doesn't care about abortions. He doesn't care about Christianity. He doesn't even care about Muslims. The only thing Donald Trump cares about is himself. He was able to actually copy-paste someone else's rhetoric to get ahead for the personality and the persona of Donald Trump. Because at the end of the day, that is the driving force of Donald Trump, is his ego. But that is not the case for people like Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is a slave to his own ideology. And the ideology is much stronger than Donald Trump. And if we understand that, I think it would be a lot easier to navigate the next few months to maybe even the next 4 years if this keeps going on. Because the ideological game of chess that is being actually wired today in the media landscape is clearing the path for a radical reimagining of conservative politics, with their nationalist agenda. And I have to remind you that Bannon has said to Ken Stern from Vanity Fair that Trump is a blunt instrument for us. And then he said, I don't know if he gets it. Like, if we dismiss those sound bites as being just like, yeah, it's just some guy talking, this guy is becoming more and more powerful. One of the guests mentioned that he's now part, in an unprecedented way, of the National Security Council. That is not nothing. That is not nothing.
Jean-Pierre La Rochelle.
Oh, I was just going to say, not only has he been given the permanent seat, but the Director of National Intelligence has been removed, and the Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff have both been removed.
Yeah.
All right, Joe Smallhoover, let's circle the circle because we're at the end of the show here. You said at the outset, again, and I get back to this, are institutions bigger than any one person? If there is somebody with ill intentions when it comes to U.S. democracy, will institutions take care of it?
Well, we have some examples, and one certainly hopes that that's true. There have been a number of impeachments of people, of members of Congress, and as well as federal judges over the years. We actually nearly impeached Richard Nixon, who roundly deserved it, and we actually also impeached, but he was not removed from office, Bill Clinton. There is great strength in those institutions today, and in fact, if we talked about Republicans being quiet, I'm not convinced that they're all being quiet because they want to get conservative voters. I think that a lot of them are being quiet because they don't know which way this is going. They do want to get reelected in 2018. And a lot of people on the Republican Party didn't like Donald Trump's nomination for the presidency, don't like the person, and don't like his policies. But right now, it doesn't serve them any purpose to speak too loudly. Let them not get their head above the parapet and see which way their voters are going. On the Democratic side, however, you're going to see a lot of noise because they're not the least.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank you, Joe Smallhoover. I want to thank as well Michael Kirtley, Jean-Pierre Larochelle, Sarah El-Yafi. Thanks for being with us from Los Angeles. Stay with us. It's time for Media Watch. And we say hello to Emma James.
Hi there.
So much to talk about. We've overlooked the sacking of the acting Attorney General.
Yes, absolutely. It is incredible. With Donald Trump every day, it seems that there are so many different lines to keep across and try and keep an eye on. And the reactions have been widespread and varied to this one, basically depending, it would appear, on whether you are pro-Trump or not. Senator Patrick Leahy, who I should point out is the ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, tweeted this: "The AG is the Attorney General of the United States for all Americans, not just for the president." He actually issued a statement as well where he said that President Trump has now put his cabinet on notice. If you adhere to your oath of office to defend the Constitution, then you are risking your job. Now, Newt Gingrich, of course, has a very, very different take on this. He is celebrating the decisive, bold action by the president. Trump practiced "you're fired" for years, he says. Today, he applied it to an insubordinate acting Attorney General. Congratulations. Now, the Boston Globe is among many to have actually released the White House statement in full. And it is something that people are very, very interested in because of the language that's been used. It says that Sally Yates betrayed the Department of Justice. It goes on to say that an Obama administration appointee, she was weak on borders and very weak on illegal immigration.
Let me ask Jean-Pierre Larochelle, that word betrayed, is it too strong? But was she fireable? After all, she didn't apply the boss's rules.
She actually deserved to be fired, but I think betrayal is probably not the right word. But she did. She outstepped her authority in the letter that she wrote to her staff. And the Department of Justice, just to be clear, was informed. The Office of Legal Counsel had a pass on the legality of the executive order before it was.
All right, Joe Smallhoover disagrees. So it's
normal.
It's a split jury.
Well, one of the interesting things is that the use of the language has received condemnation even from President Nixon's former White House counsel. John Dean tweeted this: "I have never read a White House statement as nasty as Trump's attack on the acting Attorney General." Now, one of the wonders of the internet is that people can dig about and find old stuff very quickly. Vox is among those to have unearthed an excerpt of Sally Yates's confirmation hearing back in 2015. Of course, at the moment, we're in the middle of all those other confirmation hearings, and it's being shared very widely, not only because it goes to the fundamental question of why she was sacked, but because of the person who is asking the questions. Jeff Sessions, Donald Trump's own pick for Attorney General, as yet not confirmed. But let's take a look at this clip, and you'll see just how pertinent it is to what's happening right now.
Do you think the Attorney General has a responsibility to say no to the president if he asks for something that's improper? A lot of people have defended the Lynch nomination, for example, by saying, well, he appoints somebody who's going to execute his views. What's wrong with that? But if the views the president wants to execute are unlawful, should the Attorney General or the Deputy Attorney General say no?
Senator, I believe that the Attorney General or the Deputy Attorney General has an obligation to follow the law and the Constitution and to give their independent legal advice to the President.
So there you go. It's an interesting one to have found at this time. Seemingly, though, Jeff Sessions very much a man of his convictions. We will have to wait and see if he's prepared to stand up to the President should he feel it's necessary, if he's confirmed. A lot of ifs there.
A lot of ifs. Many thanks for that. Emma James, I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.